turned around, and when I turned around, this man was there. He was a dead ringer for my friend. I almost felt like my legs wanted to give out from under me.
I decided to take a drive out to my family cottage. But I was really quickly interrupted by a jingling noise. I got the same kind of dread, uncomfortable feeling. I just came around the corner and I could see that the shutters were open. As I looked up, my aunt was standing right there, like looking at me.
So I was raised to be around spirits. It never bothered me at all. You know, I grew up seeing them, and it wasn't uncommon to have them around.
Ghosts. In stories, they can be terrifying, belligerent beings. They make us afraid of the dark. They drive us from our homes. But what if some ghosts play a very different role? What if their appearance gives us comfort and consolation? Hi, I'm Lawrence Chow. Today we meet Michelle and Matt. They both claim to have seen spirits that help them deal with the death of a loved one. Michelle Desrochers' grief is overwhelming when her close friend dies in a snowmobile accident. But months later, a ghostly encounter turns grief into something entirely different.
I lived up in Sudbury at the time, up north, and it's where we both lived, and we were at a park in the evening. It was, late at night, and we were having a couple of drinks, had a couple of beers, but we just wanted, just some alone time, and we just wanted to talk. We had a close enough friendship that, there's nothing we wouldn't do for each other. He was feeling a bit down that night, and I said, well, let's just go have a beer and we'll talk. It was an evening that will stand out in my mind for a very long time because it was just an evening of friendship. It was, a cold evening, and we were just looking up at the northern lights and looking at the stars. I think a lot of times it was like brother and sister. Other times it was just like confidant. It was just before I met my husband, and it was all on the stars. It was just him and I just hanging out and not having anybody to answer to. I had some of his close friends say, like you were the love of his life. It just never happened that, we were both single at the same time. There was always somebody in the mix somewhere. He looked at me, and it's Italian, right? I don't speak Italian, but in Italian, he said to me, I love you, I need you, and I want you. And those were some of the last words he ever spoke to me. And they were just always words that stuck with me. A few months later, I did meet my current husband, or my only husband, and he was from Burlington. So we met, and it was very, very fast. And I just, we said, well, come move down to Burlington. And within a month of my meeting, I did. I had heard through the grapevine that my friend was a little bit upset with that, but he was seeing someone at the time, and it wasn't out of the norm, for us to be seeing different people. I got a call from a mutual friend who said basically, I have something like really bad to tell you. I got a call from a mutual friend who said basically, I have something like really bad to tell you. She knew the close friendship we had. What I didn't realize was that I had friends who actually drew straws to have to be the one to tell me that he had passed. So of course my dearest friend, being my dearest friend, said, okay, I'll do it, and called me and told me he had died, and I thought, I don't believe you. He was an avid outdoor person, loved to snowmobile, and Sudbury's full of lakes and trails. He was out on the lake one night close to the shoreline in his snowmobile, stopped working. So, of course, all the lights went out on the machine, and he got out just to try to see what was wrong, try to get it started up again. And another snowmobiler came from the other direction and hit him. My best friend in the whole world, her husband just happened to be working with a maintenance crew at the cemetery. He arranged for me to go down where they were storing the caskets. I didn't get to go to the funeral because of the weather. We had so many snowstorms in January that year. And up north, you can't bury somebody. Like, it would be well into May before you could even attempt to dig. That's the first time I grieved really hard. Like, I mean, I really broke down. I just couldn't get past it. I couldn't shake it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I heard a song that was familiar to me with, of a memory, it's just something that I'd have to play the song, play it again, relive that memory. You just start dwelling. And I had to find a way to snap out of it, and it just wasn't happening. I was working one day. I would waitress for just a few hours during the day. Being new to Burlington was a good way for me to meet people in the community. It was only about between 1 and 2 in the afternoon, and it was very slow. Like, there was nobody at all in the building, aside from myself and the bartender and the chef at the back. Turned around, and when I turned around, this man was there. I don't recall him coming in. Just really didn't give it much thought. He was just there. And I kind of got taken back because he was a dead ringer for my friend. I mean, dead ringer. Just looked slightly different. But it was enough. I'm feeling a very familiar energy. And he asked, if I would sit for a moment before he placed his order. I said, okay. And he started just talking to me. He said, I was recently in a really bad accident. And I've got tears welling in my eyes. I know something's coming. I was just so in awe and taken back at what I was seeing. This man came into the restaurant. I don't recall him coming in. He was just there. I kind of was taken aback because he could have been what they call a doppelganger, like he was my friend. And he asked, if I would sit for a moment before he placed his order. I said, okay. He took my hand and he put it on his face, like the back of my hand on his face like this. Now, my friend, I always used to joke around with because he had such soft skin. And I'd say, your skin is like soft as a baby's behind. And it was an ongoing joke because for a man, you expect a woman to have soft skin, but he had super soft skin. So when I felt the skin, I already knew in my heart that this was him. I felt it, I knew it, I recognized that energy, I just knew. And then I felt the skin and I pulled my hand back, tears kind of welled up in my eyes. And he looked at me and he said, are you happy? And I'm like, yeah, I'm very happy. And he said, did you get married? Well, I never told him I got married because we hadn't talked. It was all so fast. And I said, yes. And he said, are you really happy? I said, yes. He said, that's good. You have to move on. I'm okay. Because I'm really okay. And you have to move on now. And I almost felt like my legs wanted to give out from under me. But I knew No, I knew. With that said, I turned around and went to get him a coffee. And I just broke down blubbering and, oh my God, for him just to come out with that out of nowhere, this person I'd never met before in this physical world, obviously, because it's still computing with me. And I'm really having a visitation. Just wanted to, get myself together. And I walked over to the bar, to pour a cup of coffee. I was facing, that side of the bar where I could see the door because I didn't want him to see me cry. So I turned around to bring the coffee, and there was nobody there. There was no other exit he could have gotten out of. And I saw nobody leave. It's amazing when something like that happens to you, all the questions that come to your mind after the fact. Why didn't I say this? Why didn't I ask this? Why didn't I just hug him? Why didn't I, what if, why? I started having all that run through my head. You feel yourself just wanting more. I was grateful for what I had. I would have loved more, but I'm just eternally grateful for what I have. And we had our alone time once again, one last time. I needed it, that's for sure. Did he need it? I don't know. Maybe it was closure for both of us.
Michelle tells us she accepts her friend's death when his ghost says, "You must move on." For Matt, however, dealing with the passing of his relatives is not that simple. Matt believes their ghosts appear to him, but they say nothing.
I grew up on both sides of Canada, so I spent a great deal of time on the West Coast, away from the rest of my extended family. The one thing that was constant is that I always spent summers at my family cottage, and that would be where we'd all gather on Labor Day weekend, Canada Day weekend, and that would include everyone from our smallest cousins up to my great-grandfather when he was alive and my grandparents. My aunts were really kind of our friends for the summer. We got dropped off and we'd often stay for a couple weeks at a time. We spent all of our time there with them. We played croquet, we played board games when it was rainy. Those are probably my most cherished memories. I was an early riser as a young child, which drove my parents crazy, I'm sure, but my Aunt Kathy was also an early riser. Quite often you'd get up by 7 in the morning and go down to the dock and fish while the lake was still calm. We weren't active fishers. It was more like a game. I think we caught 5 fish in 10 years. My great-grandfather was that person that you always wish you got to know better for me. I didn't really get to know him. He died when I was 10. I have fond memories of him, and I have a fond appreciation of who he was, but a lot of it's created from everybody else in my family talking about him. He was a great man. He's that person that I wish you could kind of have a conversation with now, because you think of all the questions that you would have loved to have asked, but at 9 and 10 years old, you didn't know to ask them. When I turned 19, I was kind of at that age when you start realizing that you've been thinking you were growing up for a number of years and you really weren't. You start to have these life experiences that make you realize that this is actually what adulthood is, and one of them was the death of my aunt. My aunt's death was extremely difficult. She died so suddenly, it really shook me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to process it. I didn't know how to feel. My aunt never married. My sister and I had kind of been like her kids to her. And at the funeral, there was a ton of people coming in, and every single one of them had something to say about, your aunt talked about you all the time, and all she ever talked about was coming to the cottage on the weekend to see you guys. I said I would read a passage from the Bible. And about halfway through, I thought, Matt, you have to look up. You can't just not look up at anyone. So I did. I saw my great-grandfather. when my aunt passed, at the funeral, I said I would read a passage from the Bible. And I was really nervous about being able to pronounce it, not breaking down. I remember looking at my family and just instantly feeling like tears well up and like I was just gonna start bawling if I looked at them again. It was too hard. I started reading the passage, and about halfway through I thought, Matt, you have to look up. You can't just not look up at anyone. So I did. I saw my great-grandfather. And he was sitting in between people, but I didn't see anyone else. I just saw him. He was just sitting there. He looked concerned. It was like instant. Like I looked up, saw him, looked back down at the book. And I was already at the last line. And I just kind of finished the line and I looked up and didn't see anything. After the service was done, I was standing by the coat rack and I heard a cough. It sounds strange, but with me being so young when my great-grandfather passed, there's only a few things that I really distinctly remember about him. One being that he wore suspenders a lot, and another being that he had this very distinctive throaty cough. In 2 seconds he was gone. I decided to take a drive out to my family cottage, which had become a place that I would kind of escape to take a break where it's quiet. But I was really quickly interrupted by a jingling noise, and it was a very distinctive noise. And the second I heard it, I got the same kind of dread, uncomfortable feeling I'd had in the chapel when I saw my great-grandfather that second time. I just came around the corner and I could see that the shutters on the windows on the west side of the cottage were open. And they shouldn't have been. They should have been closed and latched. And at that point, I remember my hands and my legs were shaking. And I paused and I stood there and I heard the jingle again. I was thinking, okay, either there's somebody here and I had no idea. I wasn't wanting to see what I thought I was going to see, but it didn't really feel like I had a choice either. I could see through the windows, and sitting in the three chairs was my aunt, my great-grandfather, and then another smaller figure who I couldn't really see. My great-grandfather and my aunt were vivid images. They were animated, they were having a conversation. I stood there outside the cottage and watched it. The only thing I really remember thinking is I'm gonna like freak right out in a second. Like, you know, what is going on? My hands were shaking. It seemed so real. Is there a scientific explanation for this? Did I somehow trip into another time? I don't know what I saw and I don't know how I saw it. And as I looked up, my aunt was standing right there, like looking at me. I don't remember what I was thinking. It was almost like my body was separate from my mind at that point. I looked in, there's nothing there, nothing looked different, nothing at all. It was like nobody had ever been there. Having that experience, seeing my grandfather and my aunt all happy, the most important thing that it gave me was the belief that if my great-grandfather was at the cottage, and if my great-grandfather was at the funeral home, then my great-grandfather was also there at the hospital when my aunt passed. And that was what was most important.
Matt's story reveals a typical feature of ghostly encounters. The sound of a cough helps confirm his belief he is seeing the ghost of his great-grandfather. Our experts tell us sound and voice are common ways of identifying apparitions. Meanwhile, Michelle says the ghost of her friend tells her he's okay. Experts report a message of reassurance is common among people who claim to have spoken to the ghosts of friends and relatives. Both Matt and Michelle believe they have seen the ghosts of loved ones. And for both of them, the experience helps them come to grips with loss and death.
I know, that death is simply the next level of life. We shed our skin, so to speak, and we move on to the next level. And I think people, sadly, don't pay attention to the signs that the spirits leave.
I'm still searching for what might be after. I don't know if the experience changed my beliefs. I'm sure it will influence them in the long run.